Jaki Clark.
Hi.
My long lost friend that I haven't seen in years.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
As of those of you that can see the video, we've got a makeshift podcast studio. Jackie's invited me to her home.
Yes.
So thanks for having me.
Of course.
So we're going to talk design-centered thinking.
Yeah.
What are the other names for it?
Oh, goodness. There's a bunch. Human-centered design, user-centered design, design thinking. Those are kind of the main.
Yeah, but they all kind of mean close to the same thing.
They
right?
are almost. I'm sure somebody would love to debate me, but yes, they are the same thing.
And this is going to be like a quiz because you taught me everything I know about this. So hopefully I pass by the end and I remember.
Right,
but I'm sure you'll still be educating me as we go. So yeah, Jackie and I work together, and she helped bring design thinking into my world. So thanks for coming on the podcast, and now we can share it with the rest of the world.
Yeah,
so,
pumped.
So I wanted to start. The question that was bouncing around my head. So design-centered thinking. When did that first come into the picture? Like 10 years ago? Longer?
It's a great question.
And I think I was thinking, okay, digital technology has been around for 20, 30, 40 years, something like that. Why wasn't that? It had to have been a part of the conversation when it first started, right? Yeah. But design-centered thinking really just puts a framework around it. Yeah.
It's a great question. And I'm no historian, so I'm doing this kind of off the top of my head, but I started in this industry in 2008, went to grad school for it, and it was even still fairly new then. However, the thinking around it, there's a very famous book that I highly recommend. It is the thing that changed my life when I stumbled upon it in the Ball State Library. It's a book called The Design of Everyday Things. Okay. And it was written in, I would say the 80s, early 80s. And it was a guy who put this idea out there that says, you know what? You're not wrong when you pull on a door handle that looks like you should push it. You're not wrong. The door's wrong. You're not wrong.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Reading that sentence legitimately changed my life, because I had always just thought, oh, I'm so dumb. I don't know how to do technology. I don't know how to do things. And while some people might argue that that's still true, I became fascinated with how the design of media affected human behavior. Yeah. Sorry, I'm recovering from a cold.
No problem.
Apologies. But so I would say that thinking has been around for a lot longer than we've seen. Mm-hmm. But just like if you've ever made a website or really made anything as you start in technology, you think, well, that's how I think. Yeah. Of course, that's how it should be. So I think it took consumer technology a while to catch up because it's not a normal part of human behavior to assume that you don't know something, right? You think like, well, I'm a person. I know how to do this.
It's actually the opposite. It's natural to think you know everything.
Exactly.
You have to kind of fight against that.
Exactly. Like, well, I think this is how I think it should be. So that's the way it should be, because you just don't know any better. And
especially when you're designing technology, because I know I've seen you in action and you've seen me in action. Mm-hmm. We get so enthralled and excited because you're doing something new. You're cutting edge. Yeah. And it's that kind of adds to it, right? When you have those positive vibes flowing.
Yeah, and like I've been doing this for over 10 years, and when I've tested something with a user, I have never not learned something. Meaning, you always learn something. You always get something wrong, because by sheer nature of you having a at techcompany.com email or at healthcarecompany.com email, you are biased. You're too in the weeds because you got to execute stuff, you know?
You have to be in the weeds.
You literally have to be in the weeds. And what do you need to pause?
No. Okay. Sorry, 1 sec. All right, we're good. I was turning mine down and
turning me up. I am kind of soft-spoken. So this idea of being kind of humble and having a humility that, like, I don't know all the answers. I need to go talk to people who are going to use this and make sure it works for them. Yeah. That's a humility that's not super natural for us, which is why we have to make sure to do it in design. So design thinking sort of originated out of that school of thought, and was adopted by IDEO, the D School at Stanford, and kind of spread like wildfire after that, because you saw that when you make things for genuine needs, you get better adoption. People want to use it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the crux of my original question, is because the end usability of whatever you're building should have always been at the forefront, but because it's not intuitive, it wasn't for so long. And I think companies throughout history have separated themselves because they've put that at the forefront and made the product more usable.
Right. I mean, like what a leap we saw in consumer technology when Steve Jobs in 2008 said, no, it should be so easy. It should be so easy that, a child and a grandma can use it, which was unthinkable in 2007, right? When you had sort of semi-convoluted, like BlackBerry type, lots of buttons and that kind of thing. And really pushing to make sure that users can adopt and enjoy the experience. Hey, it's better business.
All right, it took us 5 minutes and we mentioned Apple, so I think that's good, right? We didn't just lead off with it.
No,
I mean it's the company that pretty much is at the forefront.
Interestingly enough, I would say they don't really do design thinking. They actually kind of pride themselves on a process of really being a designer-led organization. They kind of empower the designers. That's, I think, changed a bit since Steve Jobs has been there. But they, as far as hardware and software goes, it's hard to beat them.
Yeah. When you see 3-year-olds just pick it up and know how to use it, that's a pretty good indicator, right?
Exactly.
So before we get deeper, can you just talk what is design thinking and some of the key steps?
It's a great question. Design thinking is the idea that we want to be human-centered and investigate human-centered needs in order to design solutions for them. So I think in business, sometimes we have solutions looking for a problem, which is not good.
Right.
And if you can use design thinking to start off your product exploration or your problem exploration, you're more likely to solve a real need of a real person, and to make a significant impact in your business, the world, et cetera. The steps there's about 5 steps. You can do them in a lot of different orders. It's supposed to be kind of a problem-solving framework. So you first want to start off with empathy of who you're actually trying to solve the problem for. So, if you're trying to make the best food truck creation website ever, you probably want to go talk to people who frequent
like
food trucks and
who
like food. Yeah. Who love food trucks. Maybe they're young, or maybe they're interested in starting a new business. Kind of depends which angle you want to approach it. Maybe you talk to both kinds of people. You then the next step is problem definition. I think it's a very common thing, especially in a large organization, to want to solve all the problems at once, right? And that can be very overwhelming. That's where you end up with products that are sort of for the kitchen sink approach. They take too long to make. They aren't exactly solving the right problem. So you want to hone in on one problem. Then we call that kind of converging, kind of narrowing in on a thing. And usually it's a problem statement like, the example I always use when teaching design thinking is cash-strapped millennials need a safe way to get home from a party because no one likes driving.
Right.
When they're, whatever the rest of that insight is. And, hence lies a thing like Uber or Lyft, right? Uber and Lyft are interesting and game changers because they solved a genuine need, right? Like it was not easy to call something from a taxi from your phone.
Yeah.
And we carry our phones with us everywhere. It's legitimately changed thousands of people's lives, but on both sides of the interaction. So the next step is ideation, where you really go big. You think of all the crazy ideas. We kind of it's like an hour. Give yourself an hour to think crazy big ideas, which can feel really scary, I think, and especially in a work context, because you think, oh my God, how am I going to execute on this? But I try to push people past it because usually in that crazy idea, there's a nugget of something that's actually relevant and can be scaled back. It's really hard to scale innovation from a safe idea, from a let's just make a pop-up or let's just make an app. Yeah. It's much easier to scale and to think of a big idea and then find out the minimum viable product within that idea.
And you want to ideate within the problem that you've defined. Correct. I think that's important because if you have if you still have multiple problems and then you ideate, then it can go off the rails.
It can completely go off the rails. And usually it's helpful to have a couple people with you. I have personally and know other people who have used design thinking in their personal life. It's really just a problem solving framework. Mm-hmm. It's the misnomer of calling it design thinking makes people think only designers can do it. But there's a great book called Designing Your Life that I recommend for anybody going through like a transition. I know people who've read it after retiring, who are trying to figure out what makes them happy, what makes them tick. And this is a problem solving framework you can use for kind of anything. Yeah, I highly recommend it. So after you brainstorm, you maybe select one idea from that brainstorm. We can talk more about brainstorming techniques if you'd like. I recommend things that are actually different than what you think of in like a TV show or a movie. Yeah.
Don't tease it. Don't tease us.
But Brian, I want to be invited back for the second episode where we talk about
brainstorming with Jaki.
In an audio podcast, I will describe the most visual type of activity. So brainstorming, I think when, people think of brainstorming, they think of like, people sitting around a table and shouting ideas at each other and playing with toys and throwing pencils up on the ceiling and all sorts of nonsense, which you can do. However, there's a lot of interpersonal dynamics that play into that. Like maybe I think you are really cool and I want to impress you. So whatever you say, I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. I'm just going to agree with whatever kind of the power player is in the room.
Or probably the thing that I've experienced most. It's like some smart person's in the room and I don't want to sound dumb.
Exactly. Right. You're like, I'm just going to keep to myself. I'm not going to say anything.
It's like this. This probably isn't crazy, but it might be. So I'm just going to hold it.
Yeah,
close to the chest.
Exactly. There's a lot of emotional baggage we carry with us to even very logical, technical meetings. So one of the things I really recommend is a system called brain writing, which is kind of gross when you say it, but it's a great system where everyone writes individually, like mind maps individually, brainstorms on their own sheet of paper. And then we go through from going really, really broad, thinking of all the ideas you can think of, all the way through to selecting maybe your favorite idea that you've created, and then talking that idea through with your colleagues around a table, or even doing a second idea, which is you write down 5 ideas and then pass your paper, and it kind of turns into like a fun game of telephone of people building off of your ideas. So there's a couple of different ways to do it, but both of those methods remove groupthink, bias. Like there's a lot of diversity and inclusion biases that come into working with each other. And if you are a person of color or a woman, your ideas may not be heard at the same level. So having a system to kind of control that,
to cut through the bias.
Yeah. It really just creates, I think, a somewhat more even playing field.
Or you
for
get
those
just
ideas.
The loudest person in the room dominates.
I actually think that's the biggest issue with traditional brainstorming is it's just chatterboxes. Yeah. And I've probably been that chatterbox.
I've been it too. Yeah, that's why when we get in a room, it's like everyone else watch out.
Yeah, exactly. So I think controlling for those. So you'll want to, at the end of that ideation, however you choose to do it, you'll want to select one idea. And usually we try to go with, it depends what your goals are for like a minimum viable product, but you want to go with, sometimes we go with the riskiest idea because you want to prototype that as fast as possible, because maybe there's a really awesome nugget in there that you're going to change the world with. But prototyping and testing is a big part of the design thinking method, because the idea of, hey, we've all agreed on an idea, let's go make it for real for a lot of money, is expensive. Yeah. And when in reality, you can just kind of mock something up in an experiential prototype, or a digital prototype. My favorite experiential prototype story is the Zappos story, where when they were getting off of the ground, there was no stock room. There was no manufacturing. They literally, orders would come in through their website, and they would go buy the shoes down the street in the store, and then ship them. And they were prototyping their business value proposition. And I'm sure it was exhausting, but they figured out the kinks without having to build out a whole supply chain.
Right.
And so that's one of the more famous examples of.
So the last 2 steps, is it prototyping?
Yeah, prototyping. And then you want to test it. So like that example in Zappos, they were testing out, hey, do people understand our website? Do they even want this service that we're providing them?
And that was at a time when buying shoes online seemed borderline crazy, right?
Borderline crazy. And I think it was like 2006 or 7 or something. It was early. And you then learn from that test. It's like essentially the scientific method, but applied to the more creative process. I am actually a hyper logical person. I've been a designer and a creative person for almost my entire.
And you wouldn't put
career.
those two together.
Yeah,
but I think so.
Yeah,
right.
I think because I've had this framework, it's kind of helped me embrace kind of put a method to the madness. I also think it's why it's caught on in a lot of design thinking is caught on in a lot of larger companies, because it takes what seems like a very abstract creative process and puts a system around it while still producing really good results.
Or just it takes another thing it probably does is you meet the people that are super creative and just naturally creative. And I think everyone has an element of creativity.
They totally do.
You just have to find a way to bring that out.
Yeah.
And I think it forces it, right?
It forces it. And I think I'm always so excited to have very technical people in a design sprint or design thinking session, technical people or quiet people. It's the peacocks, and I include myself in that group of the chatterboxes or people who like to kind of think big, whatever. Our ideas are out there all the time in the world. And I think sometimes a better system of collaboration can really bring up the forefront of all of the awesome things that people have to offer. So I'm always excited when people who are they don't consider themselves creative, but they almost always have the best ideas.
Yeah. And the first 3 steps you said all require a deep level of thinking, like empathy, especially. I think and as I think about some of the projects I've been a part of, it almost always has been true where we spent not enough time planning and just jumped right into doing.
Because you think, oh my God, there's so much time to lose. But there's so much time to lose if you get your whole project wrong.
Right.
Like a lot of people think this idea of so there's a slightly different method called design sprints, which is like the design thinking method, but on steroids. You do the whole thing in a week. It's very intense, but really effective. And it's a personal favorite method of mine. I highly recommend trying it because people think
we can't do that.
We can't spend a week on a problem, but then they don't understand that you can speed up the process so quickly. But one of my favorite parts of that technique is you actually call out, it's a part of the week, you brainstorm ways that you're going to fail. And which is, again, not a thing that humans are good at doing. They tend to think of, well, of course this idea is going to be successful because we already agreed to do it.
And I'm a part of the equation,
Exactly. And that idea of questioning the assumptions that you're making, I think is one of the best parts of that piece of it's kind of like a difference between, or it's part of product strategy that some traditional design thinking sometimes misses. But I think that empathy piece we mentioned, I would say when you want to operationalize that, anybody can, I would encourage anybody to go gain empathy for your users, whoever that is, whether it's a gamer or a patient or whoever your nurses, whoever you're designing for. But the way you operationalize that is through user research, you hire user researchers or product managers, designers, people that's kind of part of their normal job description. And you often hear the phrase when you talk to those folks that you can't afford not to do it, right? You're just going to make poor decisions, sometimes it's uninformed decisions otherwise.
And I've seen personally when I've asked people those type of questions or gotten to those type of engagements, they're so grateful and gracious and have the best insights because they use it. And I always walk away from those being like, wow, I don't think anyone's ever asked them how it is to use the current process.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is crazy.
I've never had anyone be mad about me wanting to learn more about their life and to try to genuinely make their life easier. No one will be mad about it. That's for sure. Because I think, one of the things I do in workshops is sometimes is to kind of help people wrap their heads around why this is important. In fact, all the people who are listening, I encourage you to follow along as we do this. Think of a system or an app or a thing that has really frustrated you recently. Man, this doesn't make any sense. Why would they make it like this? And then think, what do you wish the people who made that banking app or that healthcare, registration. Like when I sign up for health insurance, it's always just so painful. What do you wish they had asked you when they made it? And that's what user research is. It's just caring enough about other people to make sure you know what they're going through. Because I think we often just assume that our users are like ourselves. And when, Brian, when you and I worked together, you know that on the other side of my laptop, I had a sticker that was faced that when I put my laptop up facing somebody else, they had to read it. And it said, just, you are not your user. I think I mentioned at the beginning, if by nature of being in this discussion, you just can't assume. And I think a lot of people think that they are being empathetic when they say, I'm just like my user, but you're just not.
Yep.
And somebody else really has to who's skilled in understanding how to take those fuzzy insights and turn them into something. I think they can help make that kind of connection.
Yeah, and bring it to life.
Yeah.
And so you go through this cycle, all 5 steps, and then sometimes you do it multiple times.
Yeah.
Once you get to a place where everyone's comfortable and you've cut through some of the issues and you've gotten focused in on a particular item, my experience was you just shoot out of a cannon because you're so much more focused and the likelihood that you're going to run into an unexpected issue goes way down.
Way down. Yeah. And I think,
is that the typical experience?
I mean, that's definitely the ideal experience.
Okay,
I think, deadlines and budgets and things like that make it sometimes a little bit more difficult, but comparatively to not doing that, it's way harder.
Yeah.
So I think comparatively, yeah, especially you'll want to marry, I think where a lot of people have a misstep is they think design thinking is the entire product development process. Yeah. And in technology, I think a lot of folks even have questions about how to marry that with Agile, how to marry that with other types of software creation strategies. And there's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of ways to do it. There's kind of no right way to do it. Or
there's
wrong.
A lot of ways to get twisted around.
Right. Exactly. So I think that, one of the strategies that I've done in my last few jobs I've set up kind of teams in creating a design system process is really trying to identify early on, actually before we even start prototyping, what's our MVP? Because I can make all the beautiful mock-ups in the world, but if I test with our taco truck consumers.
We got to name it Brian and
BJ's. There you
BJ's
go.
taco truck. There you go.
Brian and Jackie. That if I test this, app that we're making with our taco truck consumers, and it has all these cool bells and whistles that are gonna blow their minds, and that's the thing that they really love, and then we circle back around and figure out, oh my gosh, that's not it. Holographic taco thing in our app is totally out of scope.
Completely freaked people out.
Yeah, it's totally out of scope. We can't make it. It's going to take forever. Then we have to go back and test. Yeah. So I try to do that scoping earlier on in the process so we can, after we have that idea, so we can really use our time wisely. And then it really does actually make things quite a lot faster. And
you touched on one thing there that I think is a common trap, where if you have technologists in the room designing and being a part of the solutioning, we love technology. Yeah. And so the latest and greatest is always where we lean.
Oh, yeah.
And it's natural, but back to the point of the process, you're not connected to the problem.
Yeah.
And so that's probably one of the biggest things, biases and focus.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the best things that can come out of that empathy research and problem definition is there's we'll call it a deliverable called a persona. And there are different types of personas, like people in marketing and advertising use them. In product development, you'll want a persona to really understand the kind of sketch of the person that you're dealing with. So in our taco truck example, maybe this person is between the ages of 25 and 45. They have a phone. Maybe it's not the latest and greatest phone because they're on a budget, because of the consumer base that we're targeting, right? Maybe it's so I'm a lifelong Android user, but maybe it's not Apple, right? That makes a difference. Creating 2 apps is way harder than creating
maybe it's
one
the
app.
new Windows phone. I can't wait to see how that plays out. There might be a new Windows phone.
Oh my god!
Second time around, it's going to work. We'll see.
It's going to be amazing. I bet it's going to be.
All right, I digress.
Oh my god! Sorry, I'm just preoccupied now thinking about the Windows phone. But understanding who they are as a whole person. Where do they live? Is this something they're doing on their lunch break? Is this a special weekend thing at a farmer's market? That whole sketch of a person helps you understand, are you making a taco truck in Silicon Valley? Because then you definitely want the coolest and latest greatest thing. That's going to be your marketing strategy, right?
You need to connect it to a scooter.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Exactly. You have to cut through the noise of all the awesome food trucks in Silicon Valley.
Everyone in Silicon Valley is going to be like, oh gosh, those Midwesterners, we're gonna send them an email and let them know how it really goes down.
Yeah, I have experienced good taco trucks.
Well, you were
everywhere.
out there, right?
Yeah. I lived in the Valley.
Is there is there a significant difference from?
You know what's interesting? I mean, this is when
in
taco trucks or in products.
In products, not.
Okay.
We're doing the second episode will be all tacos.
All tacos. Sorry, guys. Sorry, anybody who's not a big fan of tacos who's listening. Yeah, I mean, here's you have great schools there. You have Stanford right there in Palo Alto. You have Berkeley. You're essentially like a petri dish of innovation. You have the best talent who's kind of moving around. So I would say things move a lot quicker there. So like methods, what's cool, what's hot, that kind of stuff. It's going to move a lot faster. So like design thinking was a big deal 12 years ago.
Right.
In the Bay Area. Today, it's actually kind of considered not passe, but it's like kind of a given.
Just part of your
ecosystem. And so things like I was talking about, like design sprints, that's, I would say, another new wave, because it's the same foundation, the same foundational thinking, but it operationalizes it in a way that is just more feasible and feels like less of a giant mountain to crawl. Like there's literally a formula that you follow. It takes a week, the end. We, in my current role at Lessonly, we use Lean UX, which is a modified version of design thinking as well.
Okay.
It's kind of jumps in and out of those 5 steps a bit differently than the standard design thinking, but it values
a lot of the same principles.
Same principles, yeah.
So how in organizations, what type of ways does design thinking get incorporated? I think there's a couple models, right, where you could have a centralized function that helps all the other organizations. It can be completely ingrained.
Yeah. I think, I mean, there are a million ways to do it. I think
there's probably no right or wrong way, right?
There's probably some wrong ways.
Okay. All right, good.
I think probably the wrong way. We'll talk about the wrong way first. Okay. I think the wrong way to do it is to say, hey, agency that we're going to hire to make a thing. Hey, agency, go do all this stuff, all the empathy, all the design, all the prototyping, all the ideation, all the testing.
Can't outsource it.
Yeah, and just come back with an idea, and then we'll just do that idea. You can do that, but that's not creating a design thinking culture in your organization.
And I think you lose. One of the best ways I've found to motivate employees is by allowing them to do the fun stuff, like designing it. And
I think, especially people our age, are really like cause motivated in our work. Like people who work in healthcare, they're doing it because it's hard work. Working in healthcare is hard. It is long. It is arduous. There are so many rules that are good to have, but it's not, if you want fun and flash, you're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong place. Yeah. Go work somewhere else. So I think they are cause motivated. They want to help people, and bringing that empathy into your organization, bringing that discipline and saying, we know who we're building for. We have talked to them, or we have data backing up our arguments around what they need and what their needs are. That is incredibly motivating. It empowers the whole organization to make better decisions based off of the persona that you're targeting, because it's not secret information. You're not saying, hey, outside group, go and do this thing and then just come back with the answer. You're actually giving everyone a problem-solving method, which is really awesome.
And I completely agree. And a couple things added, it takes it from a project to something you care about.
Yeah, it's a passion.
It's so easy to get. I find myself having that happen all the time, where it's like I'm buried in emails, it's meetings, and it doesn't feel like a passionate thing because it just gets drowned out by the noise. And on top of that, I think when you go through this process, you walk away with such better perspective. Like you said, I think you mentioned it earlier, you always learn something.
You will never not learn something.
And just having that to carry forward into whatever your next engagement is, it's enlightening. And then you can, if you do this enough, you just keep building on it, and suddenly you're the knowledge expert.
Exactly. I think there also is a danger in that of being like, I know everything. I don't need it, because that's kind of where Apple has gone, right? Like, oh, we don't need to talk to people. We're amazing, and they are amazing. But I still think there is benefit.
Yeah, you can't lose touch from.
Yeah, you can't lose touch. But I think a lot of companies are probably far away. They're probably the only company that has done that enough to where they have kind of.
They have to check themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's more likely that we're going to assume that, if you're at a startup that's working on something for people of low vision, that you're going to assume that, oh, I know what it's like to be like this, or I'm just like them. And you're just not. I can't tell you the number. So I used to work at Disney and Sesame Street, and I can't tell you the number of times I heard other adults who'd been in that industry for a long time to say, I think just like a kid. I'm just like a kid. Like, Shannon,
but
you've paid taxes for 30 years. You're not just like a kid. Like, what are you talking about? You don't think like they do. They literally, like, developmentally are super different than you are. So I think, that's what's been fun about the career that I've had, is that this idea of design thinking enables you to make stuff for people who aren't like you. I've never been a 7-year-old boy who loves Star Wars, right? But like, I've made stuff for that audience. I've never, been X, Y, or Z in my life, but I get to learn about them, and I get to try to make their life a little bit more joyful or better, or whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. So that's one of the joys of doing design thinking, is you get to learn about other cultures and other people and try to make a difference in the world.
That carries forward outside of your work life.
100%.
You
100%.
end up just looking at everything as a
problem.
A problem and an opportunity to learn. Yeah.
Yeah. Once people kind of go through a process, once they're like, the like phrase people utter to themselves is like, oh man, somebody needs to redesign this, right?
Yeah,
Everyone becomes an expert after they take one design thinking course, because somebody needs to redesign this. They probably do need to redesign it, but you don't see it until you kind of are empowered to see it.
All right, so that's our first tangent.
All right.
We started at organizational design and ended up caring for people and designing things in your personal life. So back to organizational design.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most common? Is there one?
I don't know that there is common. I think it depends what kind of company you're talking about. Like, so the company I'm at right now, we have kind of one major product, and design is embedded within like sort of, the squads that create the work. So I would say design thinking is embedded in the organization.
Does that mean, so you'd have 5 team members and one of them would be a design thinking, just kind of guiding it?
Yeah, I think I would call the design thinking the framework by which you operate. And one of those people is a designer. Sometimes a product manager also is the person kind of empowered to kind of continue this process along. Or sometimes the two of them combined. I think that's probably in smaller companies, or maybe more like SaaS or product focused companies. That's more common. In large companies, like really large companies, you might have a center of excellence that's kind of empowering. I know IBM has quite a large design center that powers kind of the rest of the organization, just because they're so large. It's just even skilling a large organization like that in anything as simple as, how to do your time entry or whatever. It takes quite a lot of effort. So having experts that can kind of help seed innovation and keep that fresh is a lot easier than I think in this.
So maybe I was asking the wrong question, because I was kind of thinking, how do you design the organization to make this a part of it? But maybe is it more just getting whoever the stakeholders are bought in to? Is that probably the biggest struggle? I think
unfortunately the answer is either you need really influential people in that center of excellence to kind of empower, like what is in, like sometimes people call that the innovation officer, like the chief innovation officer. What does the future look like? How are we getting to that future? And that is the thought leader in the organization that's going to empower everybody, all lines of business, to be more human centered. That's, I think, pretty rare. But what usually ends up happening is the people who are really passionate about this, usually on the technology front in a large organization, they're going to have to come in and persuade their business partners, to kind of say, like, I promise you, just please let us do this. It's going to get you better results. And usually you can find an ally here or there. But
I'm guessing probably the easiest way to sell it is that it's such a small time commitment.
Right, exactly. Like it's legitimately like, you know, as I've kind of been talking about it, it probably feels really big, but from start to finish, a design sprint is a week. Sometimes you do a little bit of user research beforehand, maybe a week's worth. Traditional design thinking is usually a month or so.
I'd imagine though, even if you were having trouble selling it, you could say, give us 2 hours and let's just go through the empathy step.
Yeah,
and just that alone, I think, would uncover a number of things like, oh shoot, gotchas that you wouldn't have considered prior.
Yeah, exactly. I think some people, you know, they call that like voice of the customer, like in Six Sigma, which a lot of these ideas aren't new, but they have new names because that's what we do. That's how people sell books and blog articles and whatever, they rename things. But I think it's the same idea. So I think if you can tie it back to like marketing, this is a core part of how marketing works in advertising, of knowing the people you're talking to. If the organization has done Six Sigma, figure out how it relates, because a lot of the same ideas kind of relate back and forth. But ultimately, the people who control the purse strings have to be on board with understanding the value of actually talking to people who are going to use your product.
Yeah. So if you get approval, you go into an engagement, what does that look like? Do you usually run up against resistance from other folks, or is it an easy sell for the people involved in the project?
You mean like your business stakeholders, or
like if it's a brand new project and you're trying design thinking for the first time, what would be kind of the gut natural reaction of everyone?
I think it's really scary. It's really scary to think. So the things that you will run up against is it's scary for other people. It's not actually scary in real life. It just feels scary because it's unknown. They think like, oh, it's going to take all this time. You're going to think of something that's not feasible. We already told so-and-so in this other department and committed to this thing that it's going to do X, Y, and Z. And so I think that those are some of the roadblocks and fears that you're going to buy into. But again, if you can say like, give me a week, give me 2 weeks, give me the type of person we're designing for, and maybe if it's an internal organization, maybe some names to talk to. If not, let me go out and recruit some people to talk to. Because even honestly, just that step, if you do nothing else in design thinking, if you just go and talk to your users and try to understand who they are, the whole snapshot of them, not just what features do you need, not just feature requests.
Yeah, write down the IT requirements.
Right, exactly. Not that. It's not that. It's understanding, what frustrates them about their job. What time do they get up in the morning? Do they do email from home because they have young kids? Are they on the go all the time and they're using their iPad primarily? Do they have secure data requirements because you're dealing with HIPAA or whatever? So I think really understanding the full snapshot of their life, their background. Maybe they're not native English speakers, or they're not working in their native language, right? And the thing you're making is measuring them on percentage or time to complete, but their time to complete is different because they're doing content not in their native language, right? So I think understanding the whole snapshot of who your user is will affect your features in ways you probably didn't expect, which I think is the coolest part of this whole thing, that you get to like uncover all of these mysteries,
these hidden gems.
They're hidden gems. Yeah, they're so cool. Like those kinds of things are always just the fun part of doing product development.
I'm gonna one up you, because I think the best part is when you deliver them and show the user and they're like, you listen to me.
Yeah,
I see
exactly.
this. You fixed the one thing that was driving me up the wall.
Driving you crazy, right? And think how much of like a measure of respect that, like how respected would I feel if somebody came back and said, hey, you said this was a problem and they fixed it for me. I'd be like,
you're their new best friend.
I'm their new best friend and I'm their customer for life.
Right. Yeah. And the next time you come calling, they're gonna go head over heels.
100%.
Give you the best info possible.
100%.
Do you think for design thinking there's good? I imagine it applies and everyone can take part in it. Do you think there's better people to work in the process than others? And I say that because I think in healthcare, in a lot of roles, it's so regulated, and you have to be so committed to detail, and sometimes I've seen that it's hard to get out of that mindset. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's less of a role and more of a personality type. Okay.
But would you agree first that everyone can take part in it? I mean,
I would tend to agree. I think everyone can. I think everyone has the capacity. I think some people have the more of an uphill battle to be open-minded to it.
Okay.
Because they are so, like, we have a lot of like regulatory folks in banking as well. It's not, healthcare is not the only industry, right? There's banking, there's legal issues, but underneath it, all of them are still human.
Yeah.
They still were probably wanting to do something meaningful with their life, and this can help help them find that meaning, help them create better experiences for the people they're serving. And
then on the flip side, you have the salespeople that you have to have a hard time limit on the ideation phase, because they'll go for days and days.
Chatterboxes, yeah. So I think that there are people who, well, honestly, for me, there are kind of two answers. Number one, everyone has the ability to. Some people have a harder time being open-minded because let's say they're further on in their career, for 20 or 30 years, they've done things a certain way, and this is different and new and scary. So that's, I think, number one.
That's a definite reality in healthcare too.
Yeah, definitely. Number two, a diverse team in as many ways as diversity can mean, whether that's age, background, abilities, ways of thinking, race, gender, et cetera, whatever, that a diverse team. So somebody who does have a legal background, or who is a scientist, or is somebody that we don't necessarily associate with product development, they're going to, that like meshing together of ingredients is going to create a better soup. Yeah. Than if everyone was the exact same. Like if you go to a design school or like a graduate class, it's going to be all generally the same type of personality in the room. And honestly, in my experience, the kind of results you get are not as good as if you have very different types of people who are like, wait, what did you say? You think so differently from me. You're going to create way more magic together with those ingredients. So I think everyone can. Yeah. It's better when you're not all the same.
Okay. That's great insight.
Yeah.
Do you find when you start this process, do you have to in some ways be the referee and just kind of hold, because you do need a certain vibe and culture going on in these type of conversations? Yeah,
you definitely need to create this is kind of like a trendy word, but like a safe space, which I'm going to try to figure out how to redefine that to not be a safe space. I think you need to create let's say this. In doing this in a couple of organizations, one thing I try to let them know is like, for the next hour or the next week, try to time box it just so it doesn't feel like this is going to run off the rails and their whole career is going to be tanked because this crazy lady with, a nose ring and pink hair came in and tried to make them do something different that was different than they used to. So I try to help them understand that like, this is not forever. We're going to go a bit bigger and crazier than we have in the past, but it's just for a certain amount of time. It's going to be fine. Everyone's fine. Yep. And then help them kind of get warmed up with the exercises, things like that. But I think you do need a facilitator who, like, facilitation is a skill, just like training is, just like anything. And both a skilled facilitator in understanding just the order of how things work, but then also has enough energy, can kind of read the room. I mean,
can create the environment.
Can create the environment. I think consulting agencies charge a lot of money for that kind of service. It's really just facilitation of keeping the energy up, being able to read the room, help mediate really good kind of conflicts.
Especially if you're in your first engagement. Yeah. I imagine you get a lot of blank stares.
Oh my gosh. So I went to grad school at Stanford. I went to the D school. They have on staff or at least used to when I was there, they had a psychologist on staff. Yeah. Because you had kind of like more intense, you're in grad school, people are, stakes feel really high, you have no time.
It's Stanford.
Yeah. Stanford, so they got some money. But there was a psychologist on staff because working together is really hard.
Yeah.
It's way harder than just saying, let's all just make a list of features and let's just make it. That's easy. Is it right? Probably not. You're not serving the needs of the people that you're trying to help. So it's hard work.
Yeah. And you need that butterfly in there to bring it to life.
Yeah.
So we talked healthcare quite a bit, or at least a little bit here and there, but I guess where I came thinking about this conversation and trying to think about how it applies to healthcare, I think it's one of the most needed things just to kind of across the board generally, because so much of what's designed is is siloed. Like we have all these different pockets of healthcare, and my belief is that technology hopefully will cut through those and start to create a more unified process. Because I don't think people are consciously not designing it for the patient. I just think each person has their own perspective, and it doesn't really fit into the big process that we have to follow as patients.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of splitting hairs. Like you could argue that is it BetterHelp or I'm trying to think of some of the like new mental health counseling that you can do via mobile application. They are health services, right? But they don't maybe have the same restrictions that a medical device. Yeah. And so I think in my experience, that's especially smaller companies try to say, well, we're this, we're not exactly that, because it kind of scoots around or help them define what their guardrails are. And
or it's like that's not my part of the process. Exactly. Right? That's kind of what you're saying.
Exactly. Like we're just a healthy eating app. We don't actually have to do all of these other things that medical device would.
Or at a larger scale, it's like that's the doctor's job.
Right.
We do this.
Yeah.
Or that's the hospital's job.
Yeah. And I think that there is no end-to-end system, right? There's no like the TurboTax is always the example that people get, but like they're also because just in at least the US, medical is really fragmented. Like every time I've moved jobs, I've had new health insurance. I've had to learn a new system. There's a new internal, employee portal that I have to understand, find. I have to create a login. I have to, with the healthcare provider, I have to find a new doctor. I have to understand their healthcare system that they choose to use. And so there's no really one ring to rule them all, so to speak. One thing that I've gotten kind of somewhat close to, because I've moved cities, I've moved every probably 3 or 4 years around the country. I moved jobs as well. And in fact, I was joking, I got a flu shot yesterday, and I was joking that I had to reference my ZocDoc records because I don't know who my healthcare provider is. Right. I don't go to the doctor that often. And ZocDoc has traveled with me since, whenever it started. I started using it in 2010 or something like that. And that's my medical record. It has traveled with me from city to city, doctor to doctor, dentist to whatever. And when I look at like a unified experience, I look at that is truly patient-centered. It is. Yeah. They take all the other data, but it's for the purpose of the patient. And when I look at the future of healthcare, I love that model as a person who's not going to have the same primary care provider for the next 40 years of my life.
And I definitely don't mean to knock each, like say every part of healthcare is terrible, because I think it's not really set up to build.
I genuinely think people are doing their best. Yeah. It's just, there's no mega system
and like
for them
you
to
said,
tap in.
It's hard.
It's hard. It's so hard. The place where I go to the doctor now, they have their own kind of internal. They're a fairly large, hospital system in the city, and they have their own internal system. And I think the thing that at least I'm an adult. I've been paying for my own doctor bills for a long time. I don't have and I'm a designer. I don't have a mental model of how all of the systems work together. It's an incredibly convoluted process. So I think
it makes your head spin.
It makes my head spin. Yeah. And, and there's like 3 different websites I have to log into. And they're all trying their best, but I, as a consumer, don't have one place to go to. I don't have a mental model, which makes it harder to exist as a patient in the world. Yep.
So hopefully we're both optimists, though. We look forward to the future and
I think it's possible. Bright. I think it's possible, especially because it's a business opportunity, right? Like, oh my God, I would personally pay $5 to $10. Just me, Jackie. I would pay money to make that part of my life so much easier. Yeah. If anyone's listening and has ideas, please make whatever you're thinking, because that's a business opportunity to make it all kind of put together seamlessly.
So you've worked in healthcare, but I know your current role, Lessonly. Yeah. Do you want to say a few words about that and talk? It's education, right? That's
it's training software. So it's which again, I've never worked in training software creation before, but our primary, kind of customer base is customer service and sales. And just like other types of people who worked, they have really specific needs that they have. They have specific language that they use. And building out, I came into an existing team their software's already there. It's been really successful. So I'm happy to kind of get in and grow the design practice even more. But the design process still translates.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've never been a customer service associate. I've never done cold call sales kind of stuff. And, I can guarantee you none of our developers have, and most of the other people who are supporting that system haven't either. So it still really benefits us to use this methodology.
Yeah. So when did you talking Jackie for a hot second? When did you first hear about design thinking, or when? I guess have you always had? I imagine you always had that creative side. For a while. But how did it grow into this? Yeah,
my undergrad. So I was born in 1985.
Buckle up, listeners.
It's gonna be a long ride. So when I was a kid to when I was a teenager, was in theater for a long time and did like 40 shows as a child. Loved it. I still think in like plays, like in a script of a play. And the reason I mention that is that's just pretty common for if you look at the designers in the industry, they usually come from a theater or a music background because. And I only just recently realized this. In fact, that's like going to be my next TED Talk. I've done 0 TED Talks, to be clear. My TED Talk in my head is going to be about how theater and design are the same. You're creating a framework and a reality. You're imagining a reality into existence, which is what I love about design. Yeah. And I didn't know that this was a thing. I didn't know this industry existed, this type of thing existed. So I initially started as a journalism student and at Ball State. And my second year, I was in charge of a multimedia publication, which in 2005, this was pre-YouTube. That was a pretty crazy thing we were trying to do. And so we were kind of stumbling around, kind of making this all up as ourselves. And I realized when we made multimedia stories, how we designed the stories, how the game we would make or the interaction we would have people do, that changed the outcome of how many people interact with that story, which blew my mind. Yeah. It sounds very obvious now, but in 2015 to a 19-year-old Jackie, it was crazy, right? I found it fascinating. So I actually switched my major to psychology, kept a digital media minor, and scrambled around trying to figure out what I could do. You
had this little nugget, and
I was like, I feel like I'm crazy. And then I stumbled upon these grad school programs that really specialize in design, designing for thinking and learning and being in the world. So it was that. In my senior year, when I was looking for grad schools, I literally physically stumbled upon. I didn't actually physically fall down, but in the library, I was going down. I face planted and then found the design of everyday things.
Write the movie script.
I found it in the library, and it just blew my mind that I wasn't the only one who thought that this was interesting. And I would say in 2008, the field was still somewhat nascent, but has grown pretty exponentially over the last 10 years. It feels like I feel really lucky. When I started when I was in Palo Alto in 2008, Facebook had a tiny office that was the size of my house, which is not that big of a house, right? I went to grad school with the founder of Instagram. We were at the dawn of a lot of the social media stuff. So I was really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. But now it's huge. The field is huge. A lot of people have heard this idea of it should be designed for me. It should be easy to use. Or usability. That's a very somewhat common word now, where that was unheard of, I think, in 2008.
Yeah. Well, hearing your story back, I think it's something that's come up on the podcast at almost every episode, and that people that are doing something that matters to them stand out from people that don't. And it's hard work, because you have to, like you said, you have to balance it. You have to dig and find what that is. And I think it's cool to hear your story on how it started in theater and then somehow ended up there.
It's interesting, because I feel like, women deal with imposter syndrome a lot. I also still deal with it. In my head, I am not an artist. I am not a designer. Like, that's been literally my title before, and I've done other things other than that too. But like, in my head, I'm not a designer because I don't consider myself artistic, but I'm a designer in that I solve problems. Problem solver is not a title you can get hired for, but that's probably my actual title. But I love this idea of like imagining a reality that could be better, and then getting paid to make that happen. How cool is that?
I know, that's awesome. I think so anytime you can say how cool is that, that's what you should go after. And I think in today's age, you can, whatever that is, you can find a path for it.
That's what, like, when I've talked to college students, I think like there's intersections in so many types of disciplines. So like fashion and technology, in 2005, that was unheard of.
Right.
Now you have all these super cool.
Now you have to.
Right. You literally have to make your business. There are amazing companies that are subscription-based companies or custom clothing-based companies. Sports and technology, sports and fashion. Like, literally just take your two favorite things, mash them up, and then go work there. Like, it's the world is your oyster, especially with like so much entrepreneur. Very thankfully our economy is doing well. We have it's not easy to make your own business, but like, it's not that hard.
It's possible.
It's possible. You can do kind of anything. I think that's one of the things I love about design, actually, is it is more egalitarian than some other industries. I think in some industries it's about who you know, what you look like, and that's why I didn't want to do theater. I can't change the fact that I'm a 5'7" white girl with curly hair. I can't change that about myself. However, in design, I can be all sorts of people. I can learn about all sorts of people, and you have a lot more opportunities for innovation.
Well, I think that's a beautiful place to end, and I know in interacting with you that comes through. Your energy comes through, and it's motivating for others, and it definitely swept me up. And you sucked. you made a believer out of me, which I'm
awesome.
I'm an optimist, but a natural skeptic. So. Same. You won me over.
Thank you.
But you've covered so much here. Is there any kind of closing thoughts or anything we didn't touch on? I think we hit it all pretty much.
We hit it all. I think if this is interesting, there's a million blog articles. There's a million great Medium articles. There's great thinking on it. And honestly, it's not designing for people is not a whole hog thing you have to do. It's not binary, right? It's a spectrum in that if you're care just a little bit more, talk to a couple people.
Just say hi.
Right. Just think a little bit about what they're going through in their life, including yourself, including designing for your own problems. I think it'll make a big impact.
That's fantastic. Well, we're of course taking investors on our taco truck, so get in touch with us.
Yes.
You'll probably hear about us next through our taco truck, right?
Yeah.
So all right, well, thanks again. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.